After 15 years at Nova Metis, I was finally told what I already knew. We are reviewing your position, announced Anna Grekova, the director of the scientific department, barely concealing a noticeable hint of satisfaction. She sat across from me in a small conference room, her hands folded in front of her, as if evaluating my reaction. The company is changing its strategy, she added, handing me a folder. Your contribution is significant, but we are merging the research department with the applied development division. I silently took the documents without even opening them. They probably contained the standard severance package, 1 month's salary, compensation for unused vacation, and a promise to keep my position open for 2 months if I didn't find a job. I understand, I replied calmly. Relief washed over her face. She had clearly expected hysteria, anger, and tears. After all, I was 55 years old and being pushed out of the pharmaceutical industry, where flexibility, manageability, and loyalty to investors are valued more than experience. But what she didn't know was that I had been expecting this moment for several weeks, ever since a stray email had revealed the whole picture. You need to vacate the laboratory by Friday, she continued, encouraged by my composure. The pass equipment, corporate tablet, everything must be returned before you leave. The team will be informed today. The team, 6 talented scientists whom I had personally selected and mentored for years. Together, we had developed NET32, a revolutionary molecule for treating early-stage neurodegenerative diseases, which was now in the final stages of clinical trials and could bring Nova Metis billions. Of course, I said, standing up. Anna nodded, slightly raising her eyebrows, surprised at how calmly I was taking it all. Well, goodbye then, I added, nodding back and leaving the room. On my way to the laboratory, I passed by the glass conference room where the management was sitting. Viktor Tikhonov, the CEO, was animatedly gesturing in front of a presentation with revenue forecasts. This was the same Tikhonov who, a year ago at a medical congress, had presented NET32 as a key breakthrough for Nova Metis without even mentioning my name. Closing the door to my office, I took out my personal phone and sent a short message. It started. Friday is my last day. The response was instantaneous. Excellent timing. The contracts are ready. Dinner tonight to discuss the details. I smiled, glancing at the calendar. Today was Wednesday. On Friday, I would leave here for good, and on Monday, a completely different chapter would begin. That evening, I met with Mikhail Lurin, the CEO of Metich Nova Metis' main competitor, at the Atri restaurant. We had a separate room in the depths of the restaurant, hidden behind Japanese screens. They actually did it, he said, shaking his head as we placed our orders. I always knew this day would come, but to fire the person who created their key molecule. I smiled. Tikhonov never understood what you had developed, Mikhail replied. For him, only one thing matters, profit. He sees only the market share and investment reports. The chemical structure and mechanisms of action are just technicalities. The irony was that 3 months ago, I had accidentally discovered that the patent for NET32 had never been filed by Nova Metis' legal department. When I sought an explanation, they told me it was an oversight and promised to rectify it. But their response seemed suspicious, so I started digging through the documentation. That's when I found a SEC memorandum stating in black and white that the drug should be registered as the company's intellectual property without naming the author. They planned to get rid of me before filing the patent application because, according to their calculations, all intellectual property created by employees belongs to Nova Metis. But they didn't know one thing: I had been working on improvements to the molecule on my personal equipment during my free time. These improvements increased the drug's effectiveness by 43, enhancing its permeability through the blood-brain barrier. I filed a patent application in my own name with a full set of evidence. Thanks to Mikhail's connections, the process was completed in record time. All the papers are ready. As soon as you sign, Metich Nova gets an exclusive license for your patent. On Monday morning, a press release will announce your appointment as Director of Research. I flipped through the documents, although I knew them by heart: a 7-figure bonus, a solid stock package, and lifelong royalties from any product using my formulae. What do you think Viktor Tikhonov's face will look like when he realizes what has happened? Mikhail smirked. I'm more concerned about my team, I replied. They shouldn't suffer because of this. I've already taken care of it, he nodded. There are positions for all 6 of them. Better laboratories than at Nova Metis and salaries they couldn't even dream of. I signed the last document. I had secured my future, protected my team, and retained the rights to my work. To new beginnings, Mikhail said, raising his glass. Because of the realization of my own value, I added, lightly clinking his glass with mine. Thursday and Friday flew by in a whirlwind of final meetings, transferring research and maintaining composure, even as rumors spread through the office. Secretaries gave me sympathetic looks, and junior researchers approached me confused, asking if I could leave them recommendations for the scientific community. I documented every analysis and every record of the formula synthesis. I knew that Nova Metis would soon realize how costly my departure would be for them. Leaving detailed reports was not an act of generosity, it was proof that I had left with a clear conscience, and the company had not. At the final exit interview on Friday afternoon, the company lawyer mechanically went through the standard list of questions. You understand that all intellectual property created during your employment remains the property of Nova Metis, right? He asked, handing me a non-disclosure agreement. Of course, I replied with a smile. Everything developed within the scope of my job duties using the company's laboratory and during working hours. I slightly emphasized these details. But the lawyer, focused on checking off items in the documents, did not notice. And you confirm that you do not have copies of internal research or confidential information? I did not take anything that belongs to Nova Metis, I replied honestly, as the patent belonged to me. When I packed my personal belongings, family photos, old badges from international conferences, and a prototype vial of the first-generation Cant 32 Enna appeared in the doorway. She leaned against the doorframe, trying to look casual. I just wanted to make sure you're okay before you leave, she said, watching me pack my things into a cardboard box. Absolutely fine, I replied, wrapping a small glass statuette, a commemorative sample of the drug I had developed, in packing paper. You understand, Oksana, that restructuring decisions are never personal, she continued. Viktor believes the company needs to look to the future, to new generations of scientists. I looked her straight in the eye. Of course, business is business. A slight flicker of confusion crossed her face, but it lasted only a fraction of a second. After all, what could an unemployed 55-year-old woman do? Will you take a little break? She asked with feigned concern. No, I already have a new project. I start on Monday, I replied. I saw the surprise in her eyes. So quickly. Something interesting, I smiled. A very senior position. I'm looking forward to it. Well, good luck, she muttered, already mentally moving on to other concerns. As I left the glass building of Nova Metis for the last time, leaving behind my pass and work device, I paused for a moment to look back. 15 years of my life had been spent up there. In the conference room, the lights were already on. They were probably discussing how to redistribute my research among younger, less experienced, and more compliant chemists. But what they didn't know was that in 3 days, an emergency meeting would be held in that same room. Monday began with a clear, sunny morning. I dressed carefully in a new charcoal suit purchased especially for this day. At 7:30, a car from Metich Nova was already waiting outside my house. The press release had gone out at 7:00. Mikhail informed me as I took my place in my new spacious office with panoramic windows. News outlets had already picked up the story. The communications department was monitoring the reaction. The announcement was flawless. Metich Nova had obtained exclusive rights to the innovative Cant 32 molecule and welcomed its creator, Oksana Savina, as director of research. The text emphasized my key role as the sole inventor of the patented technology, detailed my professional journey, and outlined plans to integrate the molecule into Meditech Nova's product line. But the most important thing was that Nova Medis could no longer sell the drug without a license. At 9:15 m, I received a message from my former team at Nova Medis. It's Chaos here. What have you done? I smiled and quickly typed a reply. Check your personal email. All 6 of you have offers waiting. Meanwhile, a few kilometers away at Nova Medis headquarters, the morning management meeting had unexpectedly turned into a crisis session. The chief chemist Viktor Tikhonov arrived at the office to find the chief lawyer and financial director waiting for him, both with expressions of shocked horror. Industry news had reached them simultaneously, causing instant alarm. By 9:30 m, the planned weekly meeting had turned into a frantic review of my contract and the documentation for the drug's development. They were pulling out all the files with my name on them, wrote my former colleague. Someone had just brought all the documentation on Kent 32 to the conference room, and they were dissecting it piece by piece. I could easily imagine the scene: Victor pacing the room, demanding explanations from Anna and the legal department. By this point, the company's stock had already begun to fall. Investors hate uncertainty, and the press release had created plenty of it. At 10:45 I received an email from Victor. Desperation practically radiated from the screen. Okay, no, there seems to have been a misunderstanding. Please call me at your earliest convenience to discuss the situation. I forwarded the email to Meditech Nova's legal department and didn't even bother to respond. The industry was buzzing with rumors. Nova Medis stock had dropped by 7, while Meditech Nova's had risen by 12. 3 major pharmaceutical publications had requested interviews about the strategic upheaval that had shaken the neuromed market. How are you feeling? Mikhail asked, popping into my office as I settled in at my new desk. Vindicated, I replied honestly. Others have been taking credit for my achievements for 15 years, telling me I should be grateful just to have a seat at the table. And now finally recognition is at hand. Just then, my new assistant appeared in the doorway. Dr. Savina, the research team is waiting for you in the main conference room. She hesitated. The CEO of Nova Medis has been trying to reach you for the past hour. Tell him I have meetings all day today, I replied calmly. Our lawyers will contact him later this week to discuss licensing terms. I headed to my first meeting in my new role. As I walked, my phone lit up with a new message: the board of directors has called an emergency meeting. Victor is about to explode. The team and I accept your offer. When do we start it? By Tuesday morning, the consequences of my departure had become clear to everyone at Nova Medis. Their key drug, Kent 32, was entirely dependent on my patented formula. This mechanism of action gave it a crucial advantage over competitors. Now Nova Medis had 2 options: begin negotiations with Meditech Nova for licensing or attempt to develop a new drug from scratch, which would take years and cost millions. Victor urgently convened a meeting of all employees at 14:00. Maxim, my former lead pharmacist, sent me a message. This was Victor's last day at Nova Medis. He and the entire team will start working at Meditech Nova on Monday. Rumors were circulating that Nova Medis was planning to sue me. I forwarded the message to Meditech Nova's legal department, and the response came almost instantly: let them try. Your documentation is impeccable. Lab journals, timestamps, use of personal equipment, everything is meticulously documented. We were prepared for this. Meanwhile, I was surprisingly quick to settle into my new role. The respect I received here was a stark contrast to my previous experience. People actually listened to me. No one took credit for my research or inserted dubious comments about a new generation of scientists. Here, age and experience were valued, not seen as something to be replaced by younger specialists. The laboratory was already testing an improved version of Kent 32, Mikhail informed me. Initial trials showed a 51% increase in effectiveness, even better than we had anticipated. I had a few more improvements that I hadn't shared with Nova Metis when I realized they were planning to get rid of me. I saw no point in giving them my best work. Their loss, our gain, Michael agreed with satisfaction. That morning, we received the first licensing inquiry. While Nova Metis was still in denial, Genome Neurolab was already concerned about being drawn into the dispute. At 15:30, Maxim sent a detailed report on Victor's meeting. The CU had tried to maintain an appearance of confidence, assuring the staff that they would find a technological solution. But the anxiety in the room was palpable, even through text messages. Several people had already updated their LinkedIn profiles, Maxim noted, clearly sensing the company's shaky position. Ina paled when someone directly asked if it was true that the company had failed to secure the patent for Net32. Victor abruptly ended the key and a session. By Wednesday, the consequences of the crisis were already affecting the industry. Two major medical holding companies had contacted Metech Nova considering the possibility of terminating their cooperation with Nova Metis, fearing that the company would not be able to support Net32 without its creator. Our stock rose another 8%, while Nova Metis continued to decline. Vera from her department, the same woman who had handed me my severance package just a few days earlier, called me. Oksana, she began cautiously, maintaining a professional tone. I'm calling to discuss the situation with the patent. We believe there may have been a misunderstanding regarding the ownership rights. I don't think there's any misunderstanding, I replied calmly. My employment contract states that any property developed outside of working hours and using personal resources remains mine. All the patent documentation confirms this. Victor had hoped that you might be open to discussing possible options, she continued. All negotiations now go through Metech Nova's legal department, I said firmly. I'm sure they will be happy to arrange a meeting to discuss licensing. The silence on the other end of the line said more than any words. In the second half of the day, I gave my first official presentation to Metech Nova's board of directors, outlining the company's research strategy centered around Net32. This time, I stood at the table, not sitting in the shadows as I had at Nova Metis. I noticed nods of approval. By Friday, just a week after I left Nova Metis, the company was in full crisis. Their stock had dropped by 23% since the market opened on Monday, prompting concerned calls from major investors. Analysts published articles with headlines like, "Will Nova Metis survive? How one strategic mistake could cost a pharmaceutical giant everything." They were trying to assemble a new research group to circumvent my formula and its patent, Maxim informed me during our Friday video call. Victor claimed they could develop an alternative drug within months. I couldn't help but laugh. The original formula had taken me 3 years to perfect, and that was with a full understanding of all the nuances of pharmacokinetics and biochemistry. In the second half of the day, Metech Nova's legal department, following a predetermined strategy, responded to Nova Metis' licensing inquiry with terms that were formally fair, but tactically painful. A licensing fee 3 times the industry standard and a public acknowledgement that I was the author of the Net32 formula. Victor would rather refuse the deal than admit that he had fired the creator of their key drug, Michael predicted as we discussed the response in his office. Then they would have to build everything from scratch, I shrugged. And with each day they spent trying to replicate my work, our market advantage would only grow. On Monday morning, 10 days after my departure, I held my first meeting with the newly formed research team, which included Maxim and the 5 scientists from Nova Metis. The room was filled with enthusiasm as we developed the next generation of drugs based on the improved version of Net32. This is how scientific meetings should look, commented Anna, the former molecular biology specialist at Nova Metis. Endless explanations of basic concepts to top management who don't listen to us anyway, she continued. But when you're valued, and when they consider you irreplaceable, I replied. Just then, my assistant appeared in the doorway. Dr. Savina, something important has happened. The board of directors of Nova Metis has just announced an urgent change in leadership. Viktor Tikhonov is stepping down immediately. The news spread instantly. Within a few hours, leading business publications reported that the board of directors of Nova Metis had lost confidence in Viktor after he failed to protect the rights to their key pharmaceutical development. Along with him, Anna Grekova and the head of the legal department, who had botched the patent filing, were dismissed. Later that evening, I received an unexpected email from Yuri Selznev, the newly appointed interim CEO of Nova Metis. Unlike Viktor's previous panicked request, this email was concise and respectful. Dear Savina, congratulations on your new position. I have been invited to help Nova Metis navigate the current situation. I would like to discuss fair licensing terms for your formula. We are prepared to officially recognize your contribution and address the consequences of the previous leadership. Would you be available for a meeting next week? I forwarded the email to Mikhail, adding a short note, phase 1 complete. The response came almost instantly. Excellent work. The board of directors acknowledges your first major victory for Metech Nova. It seems Nova Metis is finally learning the cost of underestimating innovations and their creators. 3 months later, I stood on the stage of the National Medical Congress, preparing to give the keynote address. The room was filled with leaders of the pharmaceutical industry, investors, journalists, and young scientists. Many of them already knew my story. And now I am pleased to present our keynote speaker, announced the host. Oksana Savina, Director of Research at Metech Nova and creator of the revolutionary GUNT32 molecule, which will change the neuromed market. As I approached the podium, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey. Just a few months ago, I had sat in the back rows of this very hall as part of the Nova Metis delegation, listening to Viktor talk about the company's breakthrough developments in which I had played a key role but was never mentioned. Thank you, I began, looking out at the attentive faces. Today, I want to talk about medical innovations, the protection of intellectual property, and the importance of truly valuing the contributions of scientists, regardless of their position. My presentation included details about the work on the molecule, but I didn't stop there. I spoke about a deeper problem, the recognition of scientists' achievements in pharmaceuticals. Without naming Nova Metis directly, I emphasized that companies should protect their innovators, not treat them as easily replaceable resources. After the presentation, several young researchers approached me, seeking advice and mentorship. One of them, barely 30 years old, confided, "Your story has changed my approach to work. Now I keep detailed records of all my research, even during my free time." "Smart," I replied. "Your ideas are worth protecting." As the event came to a close, I checked my phone and saw breaking news: Nova Metis had finally officially agreed to a deal with Metech Nova, publicly acknowledging me as the author of the GUNT32 formula. Their stock had stabilized, but the company was now worth significantly less than before my departure. A year had passed since I was told to vacate my position. Now I sat in my spacious office at Metech Nova reviewing the quarterly research report. Under my leadership, the company had released 3 revolutionary drugs based on the improved GUNT32 formula and captured a significant market share from Nova Metis and other competitors. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Mikhail, holding a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "Happy anniversary," he said, setting the glasses on the table. The board of directors asked me to personally deliver the news. For the first time in history, Metech Nova has surpassed Nova Metis in market capitalization. I smiled. This was not a triumph or revenge, but a calm satisfaction. "This is what happens when you truly value innovations," Mikhail said, pouring the champagne. My assistant entered with an elegant envelope. Inside was an invitation to speak at the annual summit on the theme of how proper documentation had changed the industry. "You've become a symbol," Mikhail remarked, examining the invitation. The story of a top manager who didn't appreciate what he had until he lost it now serves as a warning throughout the pharmaceutical industry. Yuri Selznev, who remained the CEO of Nova Metis after the crisis, had implemented sweeping reforms. The company had revised its policies on protecting intellectual property and recognizing inventors, largely copying the program I had implemented at Medech Nova. It was never about revenge, I said, raising my glass. It was about recognition, about showing the industry that innovations don't come from nowhere. They are created by people. And those people deserve respect and fair recognition. Absolutely, Michael agreed, clinking glasses with me. A ray of sunlight streamed through the window of my office. I paused for a moment, reflecting on the journey. At 56, I had finally found what I had been missing throughout my career, not just success but recognition. My name was now forever linked with Ant 32, the drug that had changed the industry and found its rightful place.